Hello and welcome, and today we'll be making an apple pie from almost scratch. I did use a pre-made pie crust, but that was because I had one in the freezer and needed to use it. I start out by just washing my apples, dropping one in the sink, because why not? One of these is absolutely split down the middle, but I think that's just because it rolled out of the bag whilst I was driving home. I then began to fight my apple peeler that just decided not to peel the apples, and that was just one of those things. We tried to get it to work. It didn't want to, so I'm not gonna force it. That's none of my business. So I just sat there, struggled with the apples for like 20 minutes, but they're sliced. They just kind of have their peels on them still. It's not going to really affect anything. They're from the farmer's market, so they're not doused in chemicals. I then just take those apples and break them into slightly smaller pieces in order to fit in my bowl and then into the pie later. Whilst breaking up the apples, I probably ate a good 20% of them, but that's neither here nor there. They were pretty good. Some old lady on the internet told me one time that if you use a bunch of different type of apples, that's what makes the best apple pie, and I'm not gonna disagree with her because she's probably right. I take a half a cup of sugar, quite a bit of cinnamon, some allspice, and then some ground nutmeg for my spices on the actual apples themselves. I then later try to use a wooden spoon to stir it, knowing fully well that I was going to have to use my hands at some point. For some reason, I have to use my hands a lot in this recipe, and I just want to mention that I do wash my hands in between every time I touch something. I hate feeling sticky and or gross. And then in a separate bowl, I add 3/4 cup flour. I don't know, some of the measurements in this recipe are really stupid, but I'm not here to argue with it. A half cup of sugar, and then 1/3 cup of butter. I did have to go get help to measure that because someone's not very good with fractions. I once again tried to use a utensil for this before just giving up and using my hands. This was honestly probably something you should do with your hands from the get-go, and it would also probably help if your butter was a little bit more softened than mine. You do not want it melted. It will just screw this up. What I'm making here is the streusel that'll go on top of the pie. And so I just go in with my hands, mixing that up thoroughly until it forms into a crumbly consistency. I go ahead and I put my apples into the pie. It felt like a lot of apples in this pie crust because this pie crust was relatively small, but that's just one of those things that's none of my business. I then sat there and meticulously arranged said apples for a while before sprinkling the streusel on top, also meticulously for some reason, because I was just worried they were going to fall absolutely everywhere. I would like to apologize for my voice in the past 2 videos. It's been going in and out because I apparently have tonsillitis. It's fine. I feel fine. My throat just looks bad. I go ahead and pop that into the oven at 450 degrees for the first 10 minutes. And then I remembered that I like to sprinkle sugar on top of it, but then I promptly spilled some of the sugar in the oven and I was like, ooh, I better just close that up. No one will notice. It's okay. And no one noticed. It was okay. For some reason, the light in my oven is out. I promise it's working. The light's just out. We just need to replace it. So after those 10 minutes are up, I go ahead and I turn that down. What you should be doing here is after those 10 minutes, putting tin foil on top of it so it doesn't burn the top of it. But I forgot to do that. So it was a little crusty on top, but that's not its fault.